Welcome to Inside Boxing Daily, the inaugural edition of the Grueling Truth's attempt to have a daily boxing show. I'm your co-host for the show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in my other co-host. You've heard him on Inside Boxing Weekly, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
Oh, man, I'm super excited to be here. It's always good to talk boxing with you, Mike, but now we're doing this nightly, so I'm even more ecstatic about this.
Yeah, I'm wore out. Because I do a daily show, Survive in Advance, with Steve Risley. And if you've ever talked to Steve for even 20 minutes, he can really wear you out. And now, instead of a dog in the background, we've got your son, so that works out good, too.
Yeah, they've been awfully uncooperative tonight.
Well, that's because they're excited to hear Dad's new show. All right, let's go ahead and let's start talking a little boxing. Teddy Atlas today made a claim that I don't think is that far off base. And we've had this conversation on the weekly show with me, you, and what's that other guy that can't score fights? John Einreithofer. And John, I know you're listening, but you can't do anything about it because you're probably listening to it in the morning and you're not on. So I can say whatever I want. But he made the claim that he thinks Golovkin should retire. Now, when I look at this, I don't think that is that far off base. And like I said, we've had this discussion that if he was getting the fight in May, I could see it. But pushing us back to September, it's going to be a year since their second fight. And I think what we saw in the first fight is I thought Triple G clearly won the fight. The second fight, I thought he clearly won it, but it was closer. I think we've actually seen deterioration in his skills. And I don't see how this is going to, in the end, get much better for him.
No, I think that's why Canelo's people don't mind. I mean, I think the proposition of fighting Golovkin as he's aged even further is kind of a win-win for them because they know they're going to get the decision, even if it's a close fight, even if Golovkin hasn't faded much from the second bout. And so it's a win-win not only because they're likely to get the decision, but because Golovkin's skills are deteriorating further, and they're going to collect a huge paycheck for it. I mean, lots of people are going to tune in, hoping Golovkin can get his redemption. A lot of people, I wrote a whole article about this, a lot of people felt Golovkin was slighted both times. And again, you look at the press row scores, that's the way it seems to be. But I'm with you. I mean, I guess you can argue on Golovkin's side that it's not so bad either because he is collecting a paycheck, and he's not likely to be stopped. But again, you can hardly ever tell with these sort of guys. And, after two tough fights, the wear and tear in Golovkin is going to be compounded further than it was with Alvarez. I mean, it probably took something out of both of these guys, but again, if Golovkin's going to keep fighting and he wants to collect the paycheck before he, kicks the bucket, I guess it sort of makes sense. But, for me, I think Golovkin probably would have been better off retiring after the first fight because I think people by and large would have viewed him as the victor. Again, I wrote in my piece and, Jim Lampley talked about this on his show, The Fight Game, and I thought he was pretty spot on where he was like, hey, damn be the scorecards, damn be the organizations. Most people saw Golovkin winning, and that's kind of just the way it was, and especially after the clenbuterol scandal. So I think he could have just sailed off into the sunset there. He would have been viewed as the victor, and I think it would have been looked in a more positive light, to be honest with you. But now, he's carrying on, and you never know, man. Golovkin may be a tough guy, but in the third fight, I think there's a potential he could get stopped, right? I mean, again, you don't know how far he's going to drop off, and if Alvarez is still sharp, you never know, man.
Yeah, and he's been on a lot of fights. I mean, when you include the amateur fights, you're looking at probably close to 450 fights now. And the sad thing to me is the fact that Canelo was screwing around after the Cotto fight, fighting fights, not even at middleweight, against guys like, Liam Smith, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., Amir Khan. And the bad thing in all this is this. The fact that in the last year or two that I think that Canelo has been clearly beaten in the two fights, it just goes to show you why he waited. Because if this fight was done when it should have been, like 2015, I don't think this even would have been a question on who would have won, Jeremiah. When I watch Gennady Golovkin, I see a guy that could have maybe not beaten every middleweight, that's ever lived, but I think he's a guy that really legitimately, I think you could put towards the bottom of the top 10, at least top 15. I think he's that good.
Yeah, and I think so too. I mean, and this is the problem with modern day boxing, and I elaborate this, of course, in my article, just about how these guys who are actually really damn good can be slighted and their legacies are not viewed favorably because of the circumstance. I mean, as I laid out, Golovkin was screwed by his German promotional company Universum, who had Felix Sturm, huge in Germany. Yeah, and that was my thing about Felix Sturm is I liked him. When he beat Oscar De La Hoya and then got the raw deal, but then he turns around and in Germany he becomes sort of a golden boy where he gets, like 5 controversial decisions in his own career, and he's sort of protected. And around the time Golovkin was coming around, he just signed a big television deal, and so Golovkin was just kind of put on the back burner. As Golovkin said, even in an interview, he was like, "They have no plan for me. They don't want me touching their best guys," and again, when you look at it, Golovkin, realistically, if things were fair and he was given, he could tread a path based on his merit, he could have been fighting, Sturm and Zibik back in 2008, 2009. And if you would have whipped Sturm's ass, he's potentially fighting Sergio Martinez, maybe even Kelly Pavlik, late in 2009, early in 2010. And I think, if he was the champion, like he very well could have been, he would have accumulated a good number of defenses. His brand would be even bigger, and I think the temptation for a guy like Canelo Alvarez would have been fired up even earlier, years earlier. But yeah, I mean, even in 2015, I think that fight should have been made, and his chain was just pulled around for a few years, and he had to wait. I mean, I put this in a perspective as well. I mean, the only guy that I saw, I went through the ratings, the ring ratings from its inception all the way to 2019, and the only other guy I saw who had to wait 4 years while being ranked number one was Gene Fullmer, and Fullmer actually had a slice of the title in the NBA. So it's a bit different, the circumstances there. But yeah, I mean, it sucks because Golovkin got old, and then he fights Jacobs and Alvarez, and now people are like, oh well, no, it's not his age. He just stepped up in competition. Well, give me an example of another aggressor with 400 fights total who lasts at 35 years old. It's just uncommon. It's a rarity.
Yeah, and now the question is, if he's doing the zone deal, is he going to fight around May? I would think with his age, he almost has to. It's kind of like when he fought Vans Martirosyan, and everybody was mad about that. But when you get older, you can't afford to take a year off.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at this point in time, there's no really, it's not one of those things where you can rest a long time and then give your body time to rejuvenate. It's just he's already past that, and like a lot of old trainers would tell you, to rest is to rust. That's why a lot of these old guys were sharper than the modern fighters. Talk about sports evolution all you want, but when you're constantly in the gym, like guys like Ray Robinson and guys around that era were, you're just sharp all the time because that's all you know how to do. It's not one of those things where, like Adrian Broner, where you can get fat, then hire a nutritionist and a strength and conditioning coach and boil yourself down scientifically and then expect everything to function at 100%. It's just not that way. Yeah. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah.
And it makes you wonder what fighters like Ray Robinson, if they'd have been making millions of dollars, would have done. Because I'm sure you wouldn't have seen a fight every month or a fight every couple of weeks. So it kind of brings into the effect that, and we had this conversation actually today on Survive in Advance about boxers, basketball players, football players, how everything seems softer now. But a lot of that, I think, is due to the money. And why would you want to fight 6 or 7 times in a year when you can fight twice and make $5 or $6 million each time? And it makes you wonder if boxing would have been different back then, if the money would have been like that.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Well, and to be honest with you, I think there was a certain expectation to it as well because you look back in the day, and even guys like, James J. Corbett, he would lay off for a year or two and just do vaudeville tours and exhibitions inside them, or
Yeah, but see,
do
that's
something.
the point. He was the heavyweight champion of the world. He could do that stuff and get paid. He didn't have to take a fight every 2 months. I mean, back then, the guys that were making the big money for back then were the guys that were the heavyweight champions, correct? Not many
Yeah.
guys below that were making that kind of money. So Jack Dempsey can do that because when you're the heavyweight champion of the world back then, you're the biggest athlete in the world, and you can go do other things to make your money. And I think that goes to show you that maybe we would have had something similar to this if the money would have been like that for everybody back then.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it certainly would have been different. I do think it would have been different, but I think we probably would have had some middle ground between what we have today. Probably more like what we had in the 80s, where guys
Yeah.
were still active, because I do think there was some incentive to stay active, inside your title reigns as well. There was a certain expectation. It was just a bit tougher era. If you guys were talking about that on Survive and Advance, it's kind of like the war era just kind of breeds tougher men. Not only that, the sport was more popular back then, but yeah, I mean, taking this back to Gennady Golovkin. I mean, from what I heard in the deal, and again, I'm not rubbing elbows with insiders, but Golovkin was going to take a fight in May or about that time, and it was going to be a softer touch, probably a Martirosyan type guy, and then they were probably going to pit him against Alvarez. And we also got to take this from DAZN's angle. And they've got to get their money's worth. Canelo is fighting the number 2 guy right now. I mean, the guy who deserved it most, besides Golovkin. And so, yeah, they've got to generate as much revenue as they can to try to pay the bills for him.
Yeah, and then we'll transfer over to another place that's paying the bills, and that's the heavyweight division. As Anthony Joshua looks like he's going to fight Jarrell Miller in the United States at Madison Square Garden, either June 1st or June the 8th. I think this is a brilliant move by Eddie Hearn. I mean, he gets him over here and he puts him in front of the American audience. I think Fury became a lot bigger just because of the fight with Wilder, and I think this is a great move by him.
Yeah, no, I agree with you absolutely. I mean, Eddie Hearn I think he's doing a good job promotionally. I mean, ever since he came into the game, I don't know, he seems to generate a lot of hate there, but I mean, he's managing one of the few big names in the sport, a guy who can generate, thousands, tens of thousands of ticket sales and yada yada. But even he recognizes that American pay-per-view money is big dollars, and I think it's a good move too. I mean, you get Jarrell Miller, and I know John is high on Jarrell Miller, but I think Miller is simple enough for Joshua to beat. He's a big guy, so it'd be fun to watch him get beat up. And he's just, in my opinion, he's just too inexperienced to hang with a guy like Joshua. So yeah, I think it's a good debut. And did they say what city that's going to be in?
Madison Square Garden is what I hear.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, Miller, I think, is an East Coast guy himself. So yeah, no, I think it's a good move. And like we talked about off air, I'm not quite sure what comes after this, because it is good in terms of marketing, and if they're waiting for, Fury and Wilder to get it over with, that'll happen early in the year. So I'm hoping, but like you said, you're probably right that it'll wait till 2020, but I would like to see, Wilder and Fury hash it out, and then Joshua and Miller hash it out, and then we get
Yeah, but
the
if they're
winner of the
going
fall.
to do that, with them not fighting till June, that would make this almost have to be, an October, November fight in the United States. If they're going to do
Yeah.
it this year.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, if Fury wins, I actually think they could do pretty big numbers in New York City itself if they took it back. I mean, there's always a big Irish contingent. They always come out to support their guys. So that would make some sense. It's just, it seems like, and I could be wrong. Again, I'm not rubbing elbows with the guys who are involved in this, elbows deep. But it seems like the spring or the summer is the big time to fight in the UK, and maybe that's because of the weather, and it's typically rainy, but maybe it's a bit better during that time. So I just don't know if they would do it or if they would wait till 2020 like you're thinking.
Yeah, and when you look at this, I mean, there's more money to do it that way in this country. I know that everybody will say, yeah, but they could put 70, 80, 90,000 people over in the UK to watch Joshua fight Fury or Wilder. But you may be able to do that, but you put this in Vegas, there's a lot more site fee money there. Also, on top of that, if they could make Joshua a little bit of a name here, and you've got Joshua against Fury, then you've got $75, $80 for a pay-per-view, and if it sells 300,000, that's better than selling a million at $20.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and this is what I'm wondering because I've heard on occasion that Joshua and Eddie Hearn seem like they sort of have the fans' interest at heart, and they want to put it in a big stadium so more people can see it. And as a fan, I'm into that sort of thing. I mean, I wouldn't be able to watch it if it was over in the UK, but I would like to see that. But yeah, if you're a promoter, of course, you're gonna just like we talked about Alvarez and Golovkin. That's what they did. I mean, shit, they could have. They could have put that in, the Astros stadium and sold 80,000 tickets there.
Gary's World, they could have sold 110,000 there, but it's not going to bring in the money that it brings in when there's a casino nearby.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see where they go with that. Again, as a fan, I'd love to see him put it in a stadium so, more asses are there, more eyeballs are there, but in terms of promotional interest, of course, you want the money, but we'll see. I mean, I wouldn't even mind if they split it, to be honest with you. I mean, if you had Fury and Josh when it happened to be close and you do, the first one in the casino to generate the revenue, and then you do one in the stadium, I wouldn't, I could meet you halfway there. I would like that.
All right, and then that goes to the other side, which is Fury and Wilder. Second fight, the rematch. Where does that stand right now from what you know?
Yeah, from what I've heard, that it's pretty much going to be made, but it's been delayed. I thought that what they were saying the first time it got made was that it was easy. There were a few hiccups, and the negotiations went smoothly. So yeah, it seems like they're delaying this one, and I'm not exactly sure. I'm not sure if it's how they're splitting the purse or exactly what it is, but it'll get done. It seems like they both want it. If I was Fury, I would definitely I would probably want Joshua first and foremost, but yeah, that's just what I'm hearing. I'm not exactly sure what the details are. Maybe I can talk to Chris Henderson. He seems to be in the know and tease out some more details from that. But yeah, it just seems like it's being delayed, but it is going to get done.
All right, now Dillian White seemed like he had a shot to get the rematch with Josh. I'm glad he didn't. I've already seen that. It was a good fight. He had Joshua hurt, but I'd rather see Joshua take on Miller, especially if it's in the States. But when you look at Dillian White, where does he go from here? I mean, it seems to me from everything he said that his preference is Dominic Breazeale. But also I see Luis Ortiz and Alexander Povetkin thrown into this talk, too, about fighting at the O2 Arena on April the 20th.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, no, I saw those options, too, and that's because they're all under DAZN. So it makes sense. But if I'm Dillian White, I say what he said. I would go after Dominic Breazeale because Breazeale, stupid enough, and this shows you the absurdity of all the alphabet trinkets, and again, why you should all ignore them.
Yeah, so he's ranked number one.
So Dominic Breazeale is ranked number one, and technically the mandatory for the WBC belt. And Dillian White is number 3. Now, can somebody explain that shit to me? Okay, Dillian White clearly has a superior resume, and he looks like the better fighter. So how they come up with that sort of stuff is, who knows? I mean, I guess if you want to dig into it, grab your shovel or try to peel away at the onion, the political onion. I would say maybe. I would say maybe because there's a personal rivalry there that they're propping it up. Because if you pay attention to their stuff in the past, like they've jawed at each other, they've gotten into it backstage, yada, yada, yada. But we all acknowledge that Dillian White is far more worthy than Dominic Breazeale. So, from Dillian White's perspective, that's what I want to do. I want the lesser of those two guys. I mean, Ortiz, Povetkin, they're too big a risk. And after what White has done, with beating Joseph Parker.
I don't know if Povetkin's that big of a risk anymore. To me, Luis Ortiz is a risk. And
well, he's a bigger risk. He's a bigger risk than Breazeale, though.
I'm not impressed with either one anymore. Povetkin, I think, used to be really skilled, but this is the thing. We just talked about this with Gennady Golovkin. Now we're talking about a heavyweight, though, that's nearing 40 years old, and with Povetkin, he just took a beating last June and hasn't fought since. So I don't know that maybe Breazeale might be more dangerous just because I think Povetkin's going to be even more shot than what he has been. and I think he's shown signs of deterioration. But I don't think there's any way Luis Ortiz gets this fight because I don't think Eddie Hearn's that stupid to risk Dillian White there.
Yeah, no, well, I don't think so either. Again, I just think it's a matter of matchup, and I think, I think you'd have to agree with Dillian White here. It's just Brazil is the easier route to go. And again, you might be right. Povetkin might be shot at this point. Who knows? But he was signed by DAZN, so to me that tells – that indicates to me that they have some plans for him. I mean, especially with Luis Ortiz under their wing too. Alexander Povetkin is partially promoted by Eddie Hearn as well.
How about this? To make it safe, you could put Brazil against White and put Povetkin against Ortiz, and then Ortiz is safe. White's probably fairly safe, and you protect your assets.
Yeah, and I that might happen. I don't know. It's hard to say exactly what they want to do with Povetkin or Ortiz. I heard, and of course they're just rumors. I haven't heard anything confirming anything. But Alexander Povetkin might get Alexander Usyk or maybe even Luis Ortiz. But then again, I've also heard that there's been some rejection there. So I think that's the right path to go. And I actually would love to see Luis Ortiz versus Alexander Povetkin now. I think they're both past their best and just at where they are on this stage of their careers. Neither one of them are going to win a title. So, yeah, just give them to each other. I think that'd be an interesting fight.
Yeah, a 50-year-old Cuban against a 40-year-old Russian. It's kind of like Rocky IV, only it's a Cuban instead of an American.
Yeah, and take away the drug testing.
Yeah, no drug testing. That'll just ruin the fight.
Yeah, let them have at it.
All right. On this day in boxing history, what do you got today, Jeremiah, we can talk about?
All right, so on this day, Sugar Ray Leonard had his professional debut in front of a pretty damn big crowd of 10,270 people in the Civic Center. Generated a pretty good gate of $72,320, and it was live on CBS. You remember that, Mike?
Sports Spectacular. Yeah, I do remember that, actually. I remember watching that fight. That was close to a year after Leonard had won the gold medal, and for most of 1976, the rest of the year after the gold, he claimed that he wasn't going to fight. But when you look at this, his purse was $40,000. Vega made $650, so you know who the man was there. But it was too much money for Leonard to turn down. And from what I remember of Vega, he was a guy that going into that fight, number one, CBS Sports Spectacular, and you can watch it. I think the fight's on YouTube. A lot of people have DVDs of it. I know I do. But when you watch the fight, Leonard put a beating on him. If I remember right, I don't think Vega went down at all. But the funny thing was, Vega's record was announced as being 14-8-3. When it was actually pretty much the opposite. But, yeah, I mean, when you watch Leonard, you saw that the guy was special from the start. And the thing that really stood out to me about Sugar Ray Leonard is when you look at his record and you go to 1978-79, he was fighting every month. And a lot of the times he was fighting guys that weren't just, soft touches. I mean, early in his career, he's fighting Randy Shields. He's fighting Bernardo Prada, who I think was from Colombia, but I'm not sure. Johnny Gant wasn't a bad fighter. He fought Adolfo Verouet, Armando Muniz, who I've had on the Legends show before. Tony Schiavone was a decent fighter. Marcus Geraldo, who challenged Marvin Hagler a couple years later. Pete Ranzani. And the fight that stands out to me on his run to the title, and I mean, this was fighting every month. If you look at him in November of 79, he fought Wilfred Benitez. You look back before that, January of 79, he fights Johnny Gant. February of 79, he fights Fernand Marcotta. Then he fights Gonzalez in March. April, he fights Verouet. May, he fights Geraldo. June, not Geraldo Rivera, Marcus Geraldo. But if you Google Geraldo, you'll see that picture with the broken nose. That was not from Ray Leonard. That was from Roy Ennis, I think it was, in that little skinhead fight. But then you go to June, he fights Schiavone. He took July off, so he was slacking there. And no, wait, July he fights Pete Ranzani. September he fights Andy Price. Andy Price, the thing that stood out to me, if you watch that fight and you get it, and that was part of one of those Don King collections on the TV where you get like a heavyweight title fight, a middleweight title fight, and a welterweight title fight, is that Howard Cosell, who was in tight with Leonard, he was kind of with Leonard the way he was with Ali in the 60s and into the 70s, I remember Howard Cosell asking the question, is he ready for Andy Price? Because Andy Price was highly ranked, highly talented, had fought for the title before, I think against Pepino Cuevas. I'm not 100% sure there, but I'm pretty sure he did. And he comes out and he knocks Price out in one round. That's September 28th of 1978. He's back November 30th, 1979, fighting Wilfred Benitez, who is a Hall of Famer, a legend, very slick boxer. And they don't make fighters that fight like that anymore, Jeremiah.
No, they don't, and it's unfortunate. I mean, because you look back, those they're the golden eras. I mean, and not only that, I would actually say that Vega, given his record, was actually a pretty damn tough customer. I mean, they announced his record and it was wrong. He was actually sub 500. But if you listen to the commentary during the fight, they tell you, like, the dude has never been knocked off his feet. I think he was TKO'd once going into that fight. But like they said, he wasn't knocked off his feet. He wasn't knocked out. I mean, the dude was a tough customer. And what I liked about it was Vega, he wasn't there to lay down like a lot of these guys who fight pro debuters. I mean, he came out. He kind of had like a Ken Norton type thing where he would cross his right hand over his chin, and he came right at Ray Leonard. It was certainly not one of those things where the dude's a Lyft driver by day or a taxi cab driver by day, and I was the dude had some heart. I mean, he came right at Ray Leonard, and what I loved about Ray Leonard and what I think forecast his career was that Ray didn't bullshit around. Yeah, he was on his toes for a little bit, and he was jabbing. He was real sharp with that. And he was kind of working through the kinks and trying to get used to the pro ranks and find his range. But he was throwing hard shots from the outset. The guy came at him to bully him, and Ray Leonard was not having any of it. I mean, he was putting a lot of steam on those right hands early, and his combinations were beautiful. He landed a ton of shots, especially in the fourth round. He threw that bolo punch a number of times. I remember one time in particular, he pulled his head down with the left hand and just ripped that famous bolo punch, right to his damn face. I mean, but no, the guy lasted 6 rounds, and again, I would even commend Ray Leonard for that. And that was one of those things too. With the pro debut, he's getting over $40,000, and that was huge money back then. But it also, I think it kind of relates to the Aaron Pryor thing too, because Aaron Pryor made $50,000 when he fought Antonio Cervantes in his first title fight ever, right? And then when Ray Leonard offered him a fight, Ray was going to get $4 million, and Pryor was going to get $500,000. And this was after the Lennox Blackmore fight, and Aaron Pryor was like, I thought that was too little money. I'm like, dude, you made $50,000 against Cervantes just a few fights.
I think the story I read was Pryor was mad because Leonard got $40,000 for his pro debut. Pryor had come up short in the Olympic trials, and I think Pryor's pro debut he made like $400 or something like that.
Yeah, well, and to be honest with you, that's sort of and it's one of those things where, I mean, Leonard was fighting in a traditional class. Leonard, Pryor started there too, but it was really Ray Leonard's amateur success which propelled him into the spotlight. I mean, like you said, Pryor was knocked off before he could ever reach a gold medal, so that's on him. But yeah, it was one of those things where, everybody, they watched the Legendary Nights show and they're like, oh my God, Ray Leonard was ducking Pryor. He was a monster, this and that. First off,
Ray Leonard would have whooped Aaron Pryor's ass. It would have been a great fight, but he would have beat him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ray was just better in every way. I mean, his chin was better, his technique was better, his stamina, his size, his speed, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it would have been fun while it lasted. But no, that's my thing that's what I go to when people start, rambling off about, he lowballed Pryor. Funny enough, when they say he lowballed Pryor, if you look at the second negotiations that they had with Ray Leonard and with Pryor when they accepted the second time, so Pryor accepted $500,000 after the Arguello fight. So it's lowballing him, 3 fights into his title reign, but it's perfect money after the Arguello fight. So I didn't get it, and of course that was all stopped by the retina issue, but that just never followed for me.
Well, it also would have been stopped because after the second Arguello fight, Pryor was done. I mean, Leonard went on for another 8 years, off and on. But Pryor was done just because of the cocaine, the alcohol, and everything else that he got into. So let's face it, if that fight wasn't done by 1982, it was never going to be done anyways. And I think that when you look at the two, is the biggest difference in the two. I mean, number one, Sugar Ray Leonard could adapt and fight a different way to beat you. I don't think Aaron Pryor could have done that, number one. And number two, I mean, I know Leonard had a little cocaine issue too, but it never got in the way of him doing his job. And when you look back at Leonard, and I still say this, I think Leonard and Hagler, I was born in 1968. I still think Leonard and Hagler are the two best fighters that I have seen while I have been alive. You're talking about a man that went life or death with Duran, fighting Duran's fight. And then he comes out the second fight, fights his fight, and makes Duran quit like a little girl. And then the Tommy Hearns fight seals it for me, because Hearns is completely outboxing him. And Leonard, against one of the biggest punchers in boxing history, Tommy Hearns, decided to go after him and knock him out, and he did it. And a fight that I think shows a lot about Leonard that people forget also is Donnie Lalonde. If you watch the Donnie Lalonde fight, Donnie was the light heavyweight champion of the world. They made him fight the fight at 168. Everybody going to say, yeah, because, Sugar Ray always had to have everything in his way. Well, Sugar Ray earned that. Let's face that. Because Sugar Ray, when you look at the people he fought up through the end of 1981, ducked nobody. I mean, he fought everybody. When he fights Lalonde, though, Lalonde was a big, strong Canadian, hell of a fighter, nice guy. We've had him on the show a few times at The Grueling Truth. And Lalonde's winning the fight. He drops Leonard in the fourth round, and then Leonard just hits him with a hellacious shot in the ninth round. And Lalonde's a guy that fought some really good, bigger guys. Guys like Mustafa Hamsho who were strong. And he said Leonard hit him harder than he'd ever been hit before. And that was the thing about Leonard. The same thing, the second Hearns fight. Of course, I think he lost that fight. But that was the same thing. I mean, if that's a 15-round fight, he would have stopped Hearns again. I mean, in that 12th round, he needed a knockout to win the fight, and he almost got it because he was that great. I mean, I think that was the end of him was probably the Lalonde fight in '88. I didn't think he looked great in the Hearns fight. He kept it relatively close with the great close. He fights Duran, who Duran just quit before the fight even started. Loses to Norris and Camacho, but Norris and Camacho couldn't have carried Sugar Ray Leonard's jockstrap 6 or 7 years earlier. I still think if he's not the greatest fighter I've ever seen with my own eyes, he's in the top 2 or 3.
Yeah, no, and I've said before that I think he is the closest thing to Ray Robinson we've seen. I mean, the dude could do it all. Again, it's like you said, a lot of people are upset with him because he got his way, but also, like you said, he earned that. I mean, the guy could do everything. I mean,
and you know what? Nobody made Roberto Duran take the rematch in November.
Well, and we've talked about this before, but a lot of people, it's just awfully convenient how, when Roberto Duran is having the big, arguably the biggest fight of his career in a rematch against Leonard, all of a sudden, and I hear this way too often, it's like the excuses come out, just conveniently. Okay, so Roberto Duran knows he's in the dude's a professional. He's had how many fights by this point? 90, 85. I mean, come on.
The
dude is a professional.
In the 60s or 70s by then.
Yeah, he was 71-0 when he left lightweight. So I think he was up around the 80s, right? But so this is a guy who's been doing it that long, knows what he's getting himself into.
Wait a second, Esteban de Jesus beat him, so he could have been 71-0.
Yes, sorry. Right. Yeah, no, I think he was 72-1 or something like that. But so this is a guy who's been doing it for years and years. Again, he's a professional. He knows what he's getting into, and then all of a sudden he's just doing lines of blow off strippers' asses, and he can't function properly.
My guess is he was already doing blow off strippers' asses well before that.
Oh yeah, well, as soon as he made it big in Panama, I'm sure he was. I'm sure he was. Yeah, but yeah, no, that's the thing is it's just too convenient, and I don't know if I've heard it as. I'm trying to think if there's a rematch where I've heard as many excuses for somebody as that one. But the fact is, even if he's not doing coke off strippers' asses, Ray Leonard was his superior. That's
Yeah.
just all there is to it. Like we've talked about before, Ray could just adjust better than anybody, and that's what Ray deserves credit for as well. Okay, so he fights Duran's fight in the first fight and almost wins, and then the second he boxes him and wins. He fights one of the greatest defensive fighters ever in Benitez and wins. He fights one of the
And he does it easily.
yeah, and he fights arguably the greatest, lanky puncher in history, and he wins. He moves up to middleweight and fights. Again, he was past his prime. We admit that, but he fights the most well-rounded middleweight in history, and he wins.
Yeah,
exactly.
And then he goes up and he fights a light heavyweight champion, and he wins. And Lalonde was no joke. I mean, he was a good fighter. He had some skill. He beat up some good guys. So, I mean, anybody that's starting off at and this is the thing. The only person that I ever wonder how they would have done against Sugar Ray Robinson was Sugar Ray Leonard, because to me, in my mind, at welterweight, he's the only guy that sticks out as having a legitimate chance to win that fight.
I agree. I mean, you look at them. I mean, they're similar in body type, just in size. I think they're both 5'11". They were just really good at everything they did. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, that's an all-time dream matchup for me.
Because I don't know that Robinson fought anybody that could adjust what they were doing the way Leonard could have, and the vice versa for Leonard also. And I think that was the thing that makes the fight so interesting to me, is how brilliant and smart technically both of them were. But neither one of them had a problem with just getting in your grill and going to town and throwing punches.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what's lacking in today's boxing is you look at Ray Leonard, and the guy would throw hard punches. We've talked about this on air a bunch of times, but there is a lack of effort on modern fighters' part, whereas Ray Leonard, Hearns, they were trying to close out the show. You know what I mean? Yeah. These guys will they'll peck and poke you to a decision and have no problem doing so.
Yeah, and that is the difference. That's why we could use the casual Monday with that. Jeremiah does a casual Monday, which is stupid things that boxing fans say that shows that they're not really boxing fans. And when I see somebody that says Floyd Mayweather would have beat Sugar Ray Leonard, I automatically think this is a stupid person, because it never would have happened. Because I think Leonard, foot-wise, hand speed was quicker. I think he hit a lot harder. And if you don't believe that, go watch the film of him knocking out Davey Boy Green. And Davey Boy Green was a solid fighter, even though he was a Brit. I mean, Davey Boy Green, a couple years before, was giving Carlos Palomino all he could handle until Palomino knocked him out in the 11th round over in England. And when you watched it, I think that's what people miss about Leonard. I think he was one of the hardest punchers in welterweight history.
Yeah, he's definitely underrated. Well, it's like, we talk about Pernell Whitaker at length too, where, of course he was a wonderful defender, but his offense was fantastic as well. I mean, his body punch and his jab was superb. It's just like Ray Leonard. When you see the highlights, by and large, it's him, doing these flashy combinations, but the dude could really whack. Like you said, I mean, the Lalonde, the Green, those are all perfect examples of how good the guy really was. And again, that's the difference is, we watch Floyd Mayweather, and again, it's not as if I hate Floyd Mayweather, but he's just such an easy example.
He's a great fighter.
Yeah, but he's such an easy example to use because he's propped up so often. Okay, you look at him, let's take his fight against Carlos Baldomir. Okay, That's one of those fights where he's pecking and poking him to a decision. I mean, he could have tried to stop Baldomir in the 7th, 8th round. I mean, that was it was a no contest.
Here's my comparison. And actually, we have Bobby Sheridan from the Sheridan Report that comes in and talks lines every day. And at the end, he always talks about this day in sports. And this is what we talked about today. All right, because neither one of them know anything about boxing, so I give a little 5-minute diatribe on this fight and what happened and everything. But the comparison I used was this. In Syracuse at the Carrier Dome on HBO, I watched Ray Leonard fight Larry Bonds. If that would have been Floyd Mayweather in the 10th round, Floyd Mayweather would have been playing it safe and cruise to a decision win. I watched Sugar Ray Leonard go out and knock that dude out. He wasn't worried about risking his title. He just wanted to go out and he wanted to close the show. And I don't remember. Same thing with Wilfred Benitez. He had that fight won. But yet he was still trying to knock Benitez out, and he stops Benitez, with like 10 or 15 seconds left in the 15th round. And I
Yep.
think people miss the fact that, to me, true greatness is you're never satisfied with how you're winning, if you know what I mean. You want to close the show. You want to do it better than anybody else has ever done it. Floyd Mayweather was not that guy. Floyd Mayweather was one of the greatest skilled, boxers, fast. He had everything. But he wasn't a closer. Sugar Ray Leonard, Sugar Ray Robinson, guys like that were closers. I mean,
Exactly.
Sugar Ray Leonard,
No, you're,
this is the
you're
thing.
spot on.
You talk about Baltimore, but you could talk about almost every one of Mayweather's fights. I mean, Andre
Yeah.
Berto.
Right?
I mean, come on. He lets Andre Berto go 12 rounds. Andre Berto wouldn't be able to stand up for 3 rounds against Sugar Ray Leonard because he would have had his skull bashed in. Because Leonard would have set his feet, unleashed about an 8-punch combination, and knocked him in the next week. Floyd Mayweather's happy to just peck and jab his way to a win. So that's the difference between Floyd Mayweather and Sugar Ray Leonard. And if you're like 30 years old and you think you saw something special with Floyd Mayweather, you should have seen Sugar Ray Leonard.
That's right.
But anything else before we wrap it up tonight, Jeremiah?
No closing words. I don't really have anything it's on the menu for me, but yeah, I was happy about how the nightly show went, and look forward to doing it again.
All right, and guys, we will be back tomorrow night also. Same bat time, same bat channel, 11 o'clock Eastern time. You can hear us live on thegruelingtruth.net. You can hear us podcast style on iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, TuneIn, iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, every place you hear a sports podcast. You'll find Inside Boxing Nightly. And for the groupies out there that love John Einreinhofer, all the 60 to 70-year-old women, and yeah, John, I know you're listening, John, but John, you can catch him every Saturday running in a 5K, a 10K, or a 3K somewhere in West Virginia, and he will still be back for Inside Boxing Weekly once a week, and that looks like it'll be Thursday night that we're going to do that show, and it'll be right around 9 o'clock Eastern most nights. So Thursday nights, me, John, Jeremiah. Thursday night, we will not have a nightly boxing show. We will have the weekly boxing show. And you can hear me and Jeremiah every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday here on thegruelingtruth.net. All right, guys, we are going to wrap it up. Make sure you check out Survive in Advance tomorrow at noon with me and Steve Risley. And I don't know what we're talking about yet, but we'll figure something out. And come back and join me and Jeremiah tomorrow night on Inside Boxing Weekly, or Inside Boxing Daily. See, I already screwed it up. Jeremiah, where do we want people to follow us at?
Oh man, we're in most places, right? So we need you to follow us on Twitter. We need you to like us on Facebook. We need you to subscribe to Mike's YouTube channel, which actually has a lot of old great fights. I mean, that's how I met Mike.
I had to take them down. They made me take them down.
Oh crap, man! Well, you need to start another YouTube channel and just get
on
flagged.
On our YouTube channel, you can hear all of our boxing shows all the way back to 2015 when Jeremiah wasn't Jeremiah. He was Dave Sidursky. We need to get Dave back. I need to have Dave back every once.
We should. What's he doing, man? I haven't heard from him in a while.
I don't know. He posts every once in a while. He's celebrating the Patriots winning the Super Bowl. But Dave, if you're out there, get a hold of us. Come on with us some night. All right. I guess we're going to wrap this up. Remember, you can hear everything on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and everywhere else you hear a sports podcast. So for Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.